And it's live on YouTube. Okay. Put that down. All right, we're here with James Brown. We're talking One Ring. I couldn't be happier right now with my campaign going that I have going with the Patreon people who are supporting Threats from Gallifrey. It's having a lot of fun with that. And I'm about to adapt a piece from the Tales of DCC Classics, Lankmar, that came out for free RPG Day. I found a little snippet in one of the free adventures in there that was like, that would really work well in here as a nice mini dungeon crawl, and it works well in the story that I'm telling in there, and it worked real quick to adapt that. Do you do that kind of thing? Do you see little snippets from other games that you work in, if not to pad the game when you don't have time to do full-fledged planning on there, or just, a good idea is a good idea? How do you work with this, James?
Okay. Anyway, it's great to be here again. As far as like taking ideas and sort of remixing ideas from other places, for the One Ring, I haven't done a lot of grabbing sources from outside of Tolkien yet. Although I've done that for other RPG games quite a bit, and I do believe in that. I think pretty much everything is sort of a reworking of something else. Great stories are really just they're just retold again and again in different ways. There's probably nothing truly original, but I've done that. But for the One Ring, I've kind of stayed within within Tolkien himself for inspiration. And I think that mainly, first of all, playing through the adventures that have been written, using those. And then, with the Darkening of Mirkwood, sort of just fleshing that out. But using Tolkienian themes. I mean, Tolkien stole from all kinds of resources in order to write The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. But I kind of feel that there's so much in his work and so many themes that he's already done as we're playing the One Ring to capture that Middle Earth feel. Is sort of just borrow the kinds of things that he's already done, and that gives us the feeling that, hey, we've been here before. This looks familiar. This feels right. This feels like Middle Earth. But I am certainly not against stealing ideas and taking scenes or and turning them sort of into Middle Earth parables. Taking them and recouching them for a game of the One Ring. I think is pretty genius. I can't say I haven't tried that. I found myself at a Goodwill, just going through the book section, looking for a great mystery, because I'm writing a solo adventure for the One Ring, and it's sort of a mystery adventure, based in Lake Town. And so I was going through Agatha Christie novels, and I was doing all kinds of things to kind of find the aha, the surprises, and in fact, for that. I guess I did kind of. I went to the Hunger Games, and I looked through the Hunger Games books because I really love those books, and I was looking for the way that each chapter, kind of ended on a cliffhanger, a little bit of a surprise, and kind of wanted more for the next chapter. And so for the One Ring, as I'm writing this adventure in Lake Town, I used even the first person point of view, like the Hunger Games does. I used that for the solo adventure. So in sort of trying to end each part kind of on a cliffhanger, the same way that the Hunger Games would have, the same sort of tone, even in that. So I've done that a little bit. So I find that to be fun.
What would
Yeah.
Tolkien say about the Hunger Games?
What would Tolkien say about the? Oh boy, this is an interesting question. I don't know. He might find it a little violent, maybe. But surprisingly, with the Hunger Games, he might have some commonality, because the Hunger Games is about the powerful, capital, who is trying to control, and punish. And it's sort of like a dark empire. Not it's not that much different than Nazism. You have the peacekeepers coming in and using violence and threat, to keep these people under their feet, kind of thing. And so I don't know, you might have a lot more in common with it, to understand, you know. But uh, he certainly came from a totally different time frame and era,
Mm-hmm.
and background for his work. Uh, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I'd have to really chew on that, to kind of start thinking about that more.
What
Yeah.
elements of the Hunger Games would do you see that you could use thematically in a One Ring game?
Oh, well, thematically, I would say for the One Ring, heroism is definitely a commonality. Uh, Heroism, as if we got to do something. Somebody has to be brave enough or courageous enough to take a stance. Katniss became the Mockingjay. She became the symbol of bravery and courage. Someone that would just start a rebellion against the Capitol. Someone that has to do something. Where they had overwhelming power and was trying to keep that power lorded over these districts, even to wipe out an entire district or wipe out the tributes from each district, just to show that, if you dare do anything, you'll be crushed, but the people, in the face of all of that, hope began to spring up. They see Katniss, they see hope. And I think for the One Ring, it's the same kind of thing. I imagine in the Lord of the Rings, Frodo became that hope, that symbol of hope. Oh, how do we dare go against the shadow? How do we dare fight against, the Dark Lord in these times? It wasn't a time just to say, what, we'll just stay out of it. We'll just, we're in the far reaches. We're in the corner of Wilderland. We're hidden in Rivendell, or whatever. We don't need to get involved. But I think Frodo became that symbol of hope. This the one way to defeat this power over us, this control over this one ring that binds us all. This one ring that will keep us in this darkness. Frodo became that symbol of hope. So I think that theme of courage and standing up when it seems hopeless, it seems lost, it seems that there's no way that you can overcome it. I think in the One Ring, those are the kinds of things that you can build into a campaign. And it would. I mean, think about it. I'm starting up this new campaign next Monday night, and it's going to be about the Misty Mountain Purge. So it's after the gathering of five armies. Bjorn and Thranduil and the Woodmen, everyone have come together and said, "Hey, the goblins, the orcs of Gundabad, in the Misty Mountains have been largely depleted, but they still kind of run back to their holes. They're still there, sort of as a threat to us. Let's chase them down. Let's eradicate this once and for all." And so I have a campaign going on with people that'd be brave enough to do that. Would you go tunnel diving in the Misty Mountains? Would you dare go into the dark? Who would dare do that? To face who knows what? And in the West Upper Vales, as the Heart of the Wild describes the West Upper Vales as like untamed wilderness, and it's like you don't know what you're gonna find there in the wild, like dangerous things. And so that's kind of where we're going, And so there's gonna need to be some bravery and to stand up in that. So I'm excited.
Is this for the class that you're doing?
Yeah, actually, it's in cooperation with the class. Yes, I'm finally getting it going. We finally got a date set, and it's happening this coming Monday night, a week from today. Yeah, we're gonna do a teaching on token, and then followed by playing the One Ring. So
Very
very,
cool.
yeah, it's gonna be. I can't wait to see how it all turns out, and I think it's gonna turn out very good. People are excited. So
On Free RPG Day, I wound up. So my plans kind of fell apart, and came home from work, and I had with 4 hours notice convinced the game owner store, got local FLGS owner to let me have a table to run the One Ring. So within
hmm,
4 hours, I managed to get 5 players gathered around the table to try this out, and we played the Theft of the Moon module.
nice.
and they had a good time. But it was interesting in that they were not. They liked the realism of the combat, but they didn't like the realism of the how hard it is to build your skills up. I mean, like there's a dwarf going, I'm the only a dwarf who can't cross a balance across a log to get to the other side over here. I've never seen a dwarf not be able to do that. How would you respond to that kind of feedback?
Well, if was it just one player, or did you have several players that were?
Had several players that were going were kind of frustrated by the difficulty of the TNs and how little
Yeah.
how
Well, here's
weak they are as beginning characters.
yeah. Here's how I'd respond to that. I would personally, if that was getting in the way of us having a good time or having a story or trying to reconcile, what they feel a character ought to be able to do, then I probably for me, I would either lower that TN to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would allow them to have a little bit more of experienced characters. I'd give them some more advancement points, maybe some more experience points, and then just let them level it up a little bit, advance it up, and that way, what their expectations are is matching what they were being able to do with dice. I wouldn't do it too much because you do want to have a little progression in the future as they mature. But as players, for me, the ultimate goal is to have a great time. It's to tell a good story together. And the beauty of the One Ring is that I really do feel that there isn't as much difference between the starting level character and then say an advanced level. There is difference, but not. I guess if you had 5 levels in a skill, five ranks in a skill, or 4, whatever, you're going to be pretty much succeeding almost everything. But it's not quite the range you get in D&D,
Exactly.
that you can get with D&D. So it's more storytelling than it really is about leveling up. So I would just, make the characters comfortable. But as a lore master, I would probably just lower that TN rather than worrying about, giving them.
Well, it was also some dice rolls, I think, where the TN going from 14 to 10 wasn't going to make the difference when the dwarf's rolling a 6 to try to get across the river.
Yeah, well, and in that case too, sometimes you just can't do anything about it. But tell a good story in it. Maybe offer some other options. Some things that could happen. Also, don't forget traits. And sometimes those can be very creatively done, where they're doing player hero interventions, and really promote that. Tell them they can do these things. You're providing them tests, but you know what? Tell them to start asking about tasks. Say, hey, I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. Start becoming proactive with your character in your skills and in your traits. And the more they do that, the more advancement points they're going to be awarded, the more storytelling they're going to do. You're going to hand that storytelling initiative over to them. And you as a lore master are going to enjoy that. You're going to enjoy that experience as much as they are, because they're going to add to the game, as much as you are,
And they did a very good job, especially at the beginning. They had a great time going through all the competitions and things for the festival. Really, they didn't seem to get bogged down. They got a little confused by some of them weren't the greatest travelers because they weren't travel characters, and so they were taking points of fatigue from that, and were getting a little frustrated on that element and things like that.
Yeah, that can happen. So you got to kind of plan ahead, a little bit. I've fudged a few things myself. As a lore master, I kind of watch these things a little bit. If it's good for the story, kind of let it go the way it's going. If I see that they're getting bogged down with fatigue gains, and it's like, oh, we've got some major things going or whatever, I might sort of, lessen the number of rolls that I'm requiring or whatever it may be. And I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that, because we're telling the story. You don't necessarily, the rules shouldn't rule you. They should be there to give you guidelines to have a great gaming experience. And so, but like you said, sometimes those dice rolls, they can be unforgiving. And
if your character is a hobbit who has not traveled out much
yeah,
outside the Shire, then guess what? He's not going to have a high travel roll and is going to have a
yeah,
harder time.
he's going to have a tougher time. And so, there's, I don't know, there's been many times where the shorter route would have been through the heart of Mirkwood, okay, but not the greatest route to choose. You know what I mean? Instead of choosing that route, I know it's shorter, guys, but it'd be much better if you traveled the Grey Mountain Narrows, from Lake Town to Bjorn's house. Try that instead, because it's going to be a less difficult trip, less danger, involved. So those kind of things. So it's just there's choices that they can have, and you can.
And what I tried to show them was that this game isn't ideally built for a one-off for a 4-hour slot. That it's built for the big, long slot. So for the next local convention, I took out 2 slots and doing a 2-part game where you can play in one part or other part. If you play in both parts, then you can have a fellowship phase and level up your character.
Yeah, yeah.
To try to show how it works in a longer form thing.
Yeah. I would also say, though, and here's from my point of view, is that, and this is what, when Scott and I were building Mythic Battles, the one thing that we decided, we loved what Francesco wrote into the original rules, and it's even in the, in the hardback rules. He wrote about episode mode, and he wrote about narrative time. And what you see in the rule set is mostly episode mode. Everything's built around episode mode, where combat, journeys, or encounters. Nothing is really built around, okay, I get the concept of narrative time, but how do we use that in a game? What do we do with that? Does that just simply mean that we stop playing the rules and we just sort of, the narrator takes over, whether that's the lore master or whether a character, and we just sort of narrate, this period of time goes by, like you would in a D&D game, or whatever, we're going to not play out this part. It's just going to be, here's the narration of what happened. Or can we do a combination? Can we do this in narrative time where it is an overview? We don't need blow by blow. We don't need question by question for an encounter. We don't need every single travel roll. How do we do this? Can we still use dice? And can we still sort of play this out, but in an overview? And you can do that. In the One Ring, it would be very easy to do that. And it's just a matter of the lore master taking the number of rolls. Like, for example, you already know how I do it with battles because of Mythic Battles. So we already see how we do that with the endurance rolls. But let's take an encounter, for example. My suggestion is to flip tolerance on its head. Instead of saying that tolerance is the number of rolls you can fail before that encounter is effectively over, why don't you just flip tolerance to mean the number of rolls completely that you can do? That's it. So if tolerance is 3, there's only going to be 3 rolls during this encounter. No matter how many questions you want to ask, or how much things you want to try to persuade, statements you want to make, how much awe you want to try to provide here, no matter what, you're only getting the number of tolerance rolls. And so we can sort of make those rolls, see what the results are, but tell the narrative story of what happened during that encounter. And so there are ways that you can do that. And you can even do that with journeys if you really want to simplify things, using some of the same principles like for prolonged actions. Take journeys and make it into a prolonged action. Say that instead of saying this journey is going to have, we got 20 fatigue rolls, man. You guys are, instead of you got 20 fatigue, let's take that down to 3 rolls instead. You know what I mean? And let's talk about what happens, on this journey. And maybe the failure increases, for each failure, the fatigue increased more. So the stakes are a little higher for each roll instead of just based on your traveling gear, as if you were making those 20 rolls. So you just
then there's less chance of the Eye of Sauron coming up and having a hazard encounter. How would you bring
Well,
balance to
that's
that, because that's what I was disappointed with when I ran the game, was when they
yeah.
traveled, nobody rolled the Eye of Sauron, so they didn't get to see how a hazard kicked in.
Yeah. Well, if you remember, do you remember the original rules being that it wasn't just getting an eye? The original rules were you had to fail with an eye in order for there to be a hazard triggered.
Okay.
It couldn't just be the eye, it had to be a failure with an eye. Well, then Francesco started fooling around with the journey rules a little bit in his blog. And he started saying, hey, you want to try this with different roles? Can we have like sort of a signature skill? You know, what can we do with all this? And then I remember telling him, I was disappointed like you were. The eye's just not coming up enough for me. I want to see more hazards. This is more exciting with the hazards. And so I said, instead of the with a failure, well, let us just be an eye. If it's an eye, even if it's a success, that's a hazard. And he actually eventually, you know, and I don't want to take full credit for that, but I did put that on his blog. I did make that as a statement on his blog, and it did eventually become the rule. You know,
For all the adventurers who suddenly got caught by adder cops while traversing Mirkwood, they have you to thank.
yeah, that's right. But okay, so then we go to the opposite. If we're making less rolls for journeys and we don't get the eye, well, in my point of view is if you want to hazard that badly, then just put one in there. You know, so kind of build it in. You don't have to wait for the eye to show up. You know what I mean? Maybe as the lore master on a narrative time journey, maybe you've determined there will be a hazard, and if someone rolls the eye, it'll be worse than what I would have proposed, you know, or something like that. So you could do that, and you know, just build it in there if you want it. Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
For dealing with encounters, my players got really excited by it and were role playing the hell out of the investigations and talking about it.
Yeah.
How do you break that up into finding where they roll for the roles of the encounters, or can you just ignore it and let the role playing dictate it?
Oh, a balance between role playing and role playing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, especially during encounters, especially for people who it's new to, and they're
Yeah.
just playing it out as an encounter, and are new to the idea that as they're talking, then they're having to make rolls to determine the progression of the encounter.
Well,
How do you do that?
yeah. Well, here's what I've done, and here's where I think kind of needs to be done a little bit. The rules are loose enough to allow lore masters with different opinions and different styles of play to use the rules as a basis to get done what they want done. But here's what I think is good advice for new lore masters, new players, even older lore masters like me who just don't want to think of things anymore. I have to think of it in advance. So basically, I think there are a couple adventures in Wilderland, in the Tales from Wilderland, I think that do model this. They'll put in there, this question gets this answer. You know, so you kind of have to play that out. You kind of already know if this series of questions is going to happen, these are the kinds of answers they're going to get. So this is kind of how this encounter is going to progress. If you use awe during this encounter, that's going to turn off this lore master character. So they would have known that in advance. They would have just said, I'm going to use awe. And then it would be like, uh-oh, you know. So you have these things that you've built in that their choices as a role player are now affecting the outcome of this encounter more than dice rolling. I think you have to have a combination of both. I think you have to have it where someone just says, hey, they're getting into this conversation and they're asking a bunch of questions of Radagast. Okay, and I think then as the lore master, you say, those are great questions. I want to have you make a roll of riddle. Riddle best is the skill that best represents questioning. So make a roll of riddle. We're going to see how that leads. But you may in advance want to have some answers, you know, depending on how well they did, the kinds of answers that you're going to get or the clues that you're going to give away. You can do that during the middle of the encounter. Some people are getting confused with the boons at the end, where, okay, add up all these successes and now we see the result. I think the boons at the end or the results at the end have to be, you know, the greatest rewards or reveals. But during the encounter, as you're going along, there's interaction back and forth, and there are things that are being revealed during that time. It's just the ultimate, whatever their goal was going into the encounter, those are the things that have to be, put into the boons at the end. Did we get what we wanted? Is Thranduil going to send, a group of elves from Rivendell? Is he gonna put the company to come down to Woodman Town? Will he do that? And so I think the ultimate goals have to be caught up in those boons. But I think you need both. In the rules set itself, it doesn't really it doesn't tell you how to do that. It just gives you the basis of the tolerance system, and it gives you suggestions on skills and how skills are used, during an encounter, like what skills to choose for questions, what skills to use for making points, what skills are used for observing, like sitting back without even saying, and just like insight, what skills are used, and just kind of, it shares with you how to use those skills. But it doesn't really give you how to set up the encounter where here's the question, here's the answer, here's the question, kind of set that up for yourself in advance. But Tales from Wilderland does model that in a couple of those encounters. So I would encourage lore masters and players to kind of look at those examples, set your encounters up, unless you're extremely good at, improvisation and exactly what it is, all the different the nuances of answers that you want to give based on how well they're asking the question, and you can do that. Some lore masters are awesome at that, so just go for it. But I would suggest setting up those encounters. Be very familiar, the kinds of questions that could be asked and the kind of answers that can be given, and give it a variety so that you bring some depth to that encounter.
And again, where do the dice fall into all of this?
Well, I feel that the dice are, the results of the dice lead to successes, which lead to the boons, or the ultimate, the prizes, if you will, at the end. The overall outcome of this encounter, like the big goal. Did they succeed or didn't they succeed in impressing this lore master character? But while the conversation's going on, to me, the dice roll means whether or not they're getting through. Like, so say they're asking the questions, and I said, make a roll a riddle, and they fail it. I'd say your question was misunderstood. Maybe the lore master character completely ignores what they just asked and starts talking about something differently, or maybe you've upset him in some way if you rolled the eye, or whatever. Something happened in there where there was a complete misunderstanding, and it kind of creates this new drama. But if they succeed simply, they might get a simple answer. If they succeed with great or extraordinary successes at their questioning, the lore master character becomes impressed, and goes to a deeper level of conversation with them and engages them maybe on that topic a little bit more, considering perhaps the things that they've been asking for, will they go that direction, or maybe reveals even a little something in it. So I feel like that's kind of how I play it out, when we play the games. I definitely consider their role. Because what I do is I say, here's what they've asked, or here's what they've stated their point, here's how they tried to impress. I make them do the roll, and then I use the roll to determine what I'm going to do next. That's how I play it. Some people don't do it that way, but that's the way I do it. And because I feel like the mechanics are a fun part of the game for me, and I feel like they're an important part of the game for me. I'm not of the philosophy, and I respect those that are, but I'm not of the philosophy to kind of during encounters just throw the dice out. And I know they
it's just sometimes hard. Sometimes the role players get really impassioned about it, and it's hard to break them up to say, okay, this is a good place for where you need to be making a riddle row or an all row here as you're standing up to this guy. Or, as you're
what I like about the dice is that it allows a little detachment in the way that, say, combat allows you detachment from your character. Like, role players really get into, but we're not LARPing. We haven't put costumes on. We're not running around. We're not running around the room. We're sitting at a table with some dice. That kind of thing.
In some places.
In some, yeah. In all fairness, but when I was a kid, my father was in the Air Force, and the first time I ever saw LARPing, there was these Air Force guys, and they were outside, and they had the shields. You know, they had shields and swords and armor, and they were actually going at it in the yard. I saw that, and they were advanced Dungeons and Dragons players. You know, that's what they like to do, and they were out there really hitting. But I can't imagine anybody in a role playing situation saying, "Well, let's go have combat, and we're not going to use dice. We're just going to see how many times you actually hit the dungeon master. You know, if you can hit the dungeon master, then you've actually hit your monster. You know, that kind of thing. You know, and the dungeon master is some ninja warrior. You know what I mean? Who's like beating down the players. You know, that kind of thing. But they wouldn't do that. They would use dice. They would say, I'm a skilled swordsman. My character is a skilled swordsman. And I'm rolling, but snap! That dice roll was horrible. I mean, he threw his sword. The sword slipped out of his hand. Oh my goodness! You know, and nobody would complain because the result of the dice made it fun. You know, and I think it's the same way with a social encounter. I mean, I think that you could have a really smart player, who's really good at saying things, but he gets that unlucky roll, and he could still mess up. You know what I mean? In some way, he's not in control of what that lore master character is going to respond, or how that lore master character is going to respond to his character, as much as he wants to be. He thinks he's just so smart that he can make the lore master, do whatever he wants him to do because he's so smart. But that's why I like the dice. The dice say, yeah, maybe. You know what I mean? But maybe not. So, it kind of levels the playing field a little bit in some respects. But if their character is advanced in persuasion, they've got they're going to succeed more often than not in persuading a lore master character with their points. So there's a balancing. The game mechanics work. So kind of how I see it.
So how for doing your mystery, when they're doing the investigations and talking to suspects and things like that.
Yeah.
How are you gonna adjust? Are you gonna make any adjustments to encounters for guys not for giving away that they're talking to the right suspect or that they're talking to red herrings? How are you gonna work that all in that kind of situation? I find that fascinating.
Oh well, I can't wait till I get this done. But this is kind of cool because there's a lot of encounters in that Lake Town. I call it Secrets of Lake Town. Okay, so there's a lot of different encounters in there with various people, but every encounter means something. So even if they come and of course this is a solo adventure, so I have a lot of control over it. So there's going to be, I've built it so that even as a player, you can make choices and you can make rolls, but there are only certain results that are going to happen. So like the way I do encounters in the solo adventure is if you choose to use a certain skill and you succeed at it, then this is going to be the kind of answer you're going to get. This is the results you're going to get. But it leaves it up to the person that's playing it, the options. They can use what skill they want to use. They can talk to who they want to talk to or where they want to go. Those kind of things. So, I don't know. It's going to be hard to explain with you without giving it all away. But that's a little different because it's a solo adventure. Mm-hmm. So I have a lot more control.
Well, if it wasn't a solo adventure, how would you structure it and alter it to not basically have a big flashing light go, you found this culprit, you found the culprit, you found the culprit?
Oh.
How would you do that in that kind of situation?
Because you would carefully craft, you're writing a story, so you carefully craft your answers as to what the line of questioning is, the reveals. What are they going to get out of this particular character? What are they going to get out of this particular character? The kinds of answers they're going to get, or the kinds of suspicious behavior. In fact, you're even writing into this. You're writing into those red herrings. You're writing in answers that actually can throw them off as well. Just like you would see in a movie or read it in an Agatha Christie novel. You're getting an answer that's true, that's or that's, you know, but they're reading into it one thing when it really means another thing. So it's, you got to get creative with it, you know. And in a game, they wouldn't necessarily know that they've got the right suspect yet. They could question and gather clues, which is what I do in the solo adventure. I have a mechanic that I call clues. So if you succeed at these encounters, you also find these clues. Okay, and so you have to go to the back of the adventure and you get clue number 1, or you found clue number 5, and then so as a player, you're collecting these clues, and hopefully you're putting this thing together. As you collect all these clues, it's leading you to the right conclusion, or what you're trying to accomplish. So that's what I would do. Yeah.
Interesting. And any last thoughts about adaptations, about taking things from other elements, from what you've seen, from seeing from other fantasy things, because seeing it there going, you know, this is a really Tolkien-esque moment right here in this thing. How do you adapt that in and make that fit within the structure of the One Ring? Okay,
well, I see you're wearing a Star Wars t-shirt. So, yes, my second love, Star Wars. It's debatable. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, they're kind of... but, okay, so the Lord of the Rings and Star Wars have similarities because they're both based on this idea of monomyth, right? And the hero's journey. In fact, I think it was Rodney Thompson from Wizards of the Coast who wrote in the one of the supplements for the revised core rules of the Star Wars role-playing game. I think it may have been the let's see, it was the
Galactic Campaign Guide.
It may have been the Galactic Campaign Guide. Yeah, he writes about that. He writes about the hero's journey. It's incredible. You go back and read it. It's an amazing piece. It might have been overlooked by a lot of people, but he writes about the hero's journey, and then it's also in that Galactic Campaign Guide where he gives, I think it's like over 100 adventure hooks or something like that. Those are just rehashed. You know, he doesn't give you the you know, where it's all coming from, but those are just sort of rehashed storylines that have been heard over and over again in different places, but now it's putting a Star Wars spin on it. You know what I mean? So actually, I've gone to that before. I've actually gone to my Star Wars lists of, you know, adventure hooks and how could this work in a fantasy setting? You know, or how could this play out a little differently? What I was going to say though about the monomyth is there's a great video, and it'd be great for any writers or any role players, lore masters. Go watch it. It's a video on YouTube called "Everything's a Remix." Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of it. I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. Something that writers right now, are, you know, in the last couple of years, really popular writers have been talking about it, looking it up. It's well done, but it's called "Everything is a Remix," and it begins. It's in a few parts, and it talks about music and how music is not really original. How like Led Zeppelin is the biggest, you know, they were the like most popular touring rock band, you know, in the 70s. Yet they used everybody's beats. You know, they never claimed originality. It's amazing. They go through it. They show it to you. They show you which songs it was taken from, who originally sang. And then the most brilliant part of it, though, is Star Wars. He talks about movies, but he talks about Star Wars. This is so fascinating. Almost everything in Star Wars is ripped off somewhere else. George Lucas used the old serials, you know, the Flash Gordon serials. He used footage from World War II. He used, I mean, sources. It's just crazy. And they put them side by side with a scene from Star Wars and a scene from an old movie or an old serial. And it's like he ripped it off. He framed the scene exactly. Like when you're watching the gunner and, you know, the Falcon, you know, you're watching Han Solo, you know, Luke Skywalker or whatever. And then you look at a World War II picture of the gunners, you know, and it's the same shot. It's just science fiction now, you know. Even the robots, you know, even R2-D2 and C-3PO, they were not original either. They're ripped off from an older black and white sci-fi. So it's just kind of the scene in the Death Star with Luke and Leia swinging on the rope. That's not original. You know, he stole from westerns, you know, and all of that. And of course, even the idea that everything is a remix, even that's not new. I mean, King Solomon, from some of the oldest manuscripts we have from the Bible. King Solomon wrote, there's nothing new under the sun. And that's some of the oldest writing we have. The most creative people are the ones that know how to rip something off. They know how to take something and redo it, because there's something about human beings that we like the familiar. We like it couched in a new way. Like a new name or even Tolkien. He didn't even use new names sometimes. He loved philology. He loved all of that. But yet, and names were so important to him. But he took names. He took Meduseld, the name of the Golden Hall. That was ripped out of Beowulf. So I mean, there's things that you just take them and you borrow them and you make them your own, and people never know. It's not flat out plagiarism, but it's recreating. And so I would say, for the One Ring, take stuff from Star Wars. Take stuff from if it worked, because it's basically space opera, space fantasy, right? So you could take things from old Western serials. You can take things from Flash Gordon. You can take these ideas of the Tolkien did it with the Eucatastrophe. He took it and he said, let's build up to this moment of an incredible this incredible rescue, this sudden joy that comes, but then we got to learn something again. We get to this point, but then something else happens, and there's a new drama, and then we build up again, and then a great thing happens again, and then that's very common in literature. That's very common in games. But you can do that with the One Ring. What makes for a great one-off would be maybe that single build leading up to this joyous ending. You know what I mean? And then but leaving on a cliffhanger. And the next time we come together, we're ready to go again. For the next one, we get to that climax again. And so I think you could totally steal, just get on your bookshelf. One of my favorite authors is a guy named Ted Dekker. Now he's a Christian writer, but he does thrillers, and he's done some crime thrillers and things like that too. But he wrote a book series called the Circle Trilogy, which is very creative, because it's a dual world story where there's this character in the real world, and then he goes to this world of imagination, but you're not sure which is the real world. Which one is it, the imaginary world, or what seems to be the real world? You're not sure, but he kind of like falls asleep in one world and wakes up in the other. There's different things that happens like that, and he goes back and forth between the two, and there's a parallel story that's going on in both worlds, okay, and how they interact with each other. It's pretty genius. But there's one thing he uses in there, this one scene with this group of outlaws, this group of bad guys, and they basically kidnap people, and they put them in these barrels, and they drown them in the barrels and seal the barrels up. That's how they kill them. So it's kind of I thought when I first read that, I thought, ooh, I've never seen that before. Never heard that before. That's kind of gruesome. And I ended up using that actually in a Star Wars campaign, but in space. I had these pods, where they were drowned in these pods in space, and they were floating in space, and it came along and hit the character's ship, and they had to get out and pull these pods in, and all these drowned characters. You know what I mean? So you could steal ideas like that from anywhere and use them. And so I'd just say, get creative. You gotta watch stuff. You gotta read things. Pull those ideas in, and any little elements even make a big difference. To make it exciting or interesting and unique. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, James, for joining us tonight and putting a really, really interesting spin on adaptation, and helping me and answer some of the harder questions that my one-off group from Free RPG Day had for me.
Great. Well, good. Well, I look forward to the future.
All right. Have a wonderful evening.
All right. You too. Take care. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.